How could you do this to me? Both of you. Did you think you could get away with it? My voice echoed through the living room, each word dripping with the sting of betrayal. I stared at them, Mark and Whitney, standing side by side as if united against me. Whitney smirked. Her eyes were cold. Everyone will get over it eventually. Besides, we're happier now. Why don't you just accept it? Accept it? You haven't begun to understand what you've lost yet. I clenched my fists, holding back the tears. This was all too unreal. Just months ago, Mark and I were planning our future, our harmonious life radiating a deceptive calm. Now here I was, faced with the ultimate betrayal by the two people I trusted the most. I never thought I'd see the day when my own sister would look at me with such disdain. I had stumbled upon the affair by accident. It started with intercepted texts, then suspicious behavior that my gut insisted I couldn't ignore. Late-night phone calls, secretive smiles. I should have known. Mark, my husband of 7 years, stepped forward looking almost apologetic. Rachel, I didn't mean for you to find out like this. But well, Whitney and I, we're in love. We can't deny it anymore. His words cut deeper than any weapon could. Love? You call this love? I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. How long has this been going on? Whitney shrugged nonchalant. 6 months. We didn't plan it, but it happened. You can't choose love, Rachel. Don't pretend you're the victim here. I snapped. The two of them stood there together as if their betrayal was justified by some twisted sense of destiny. Mark exchanged a glance with Whitney. We hoped you'd understand. Understand? I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that offered no joy. You betrayed me with my own sister. How am I supposed to understand that? Whitney sighed, looking almost bored. This drama isn't helping anyone. Why can't you just move on? I repeated, shaking my head. You both have no idea what's coming. I turned on my heel, leaving them standing there. My mind was a whirlwind. Thoughts were clashing violently. I needed to get out, to breathe. I wasn't just going to sit back and let them destroy my life without consequences. Back in the solitude of my car, I allowed myself a brief moment of tears, but as the tears dried up, they were replaced by something much stronger: determination. This wasn't the end of my story, not by a long shot. I pulled out my phone. The screen was blurry with exhaustion. The first call I made was to my parents. Mom, Dad, meet me at home. We need to talk. They had to know. Our family needed to come together, even as we found ourselves broken in ways we never imagined. Whitney and Mark thought they could break me, but they were wrong. They hadn't seen anything yet. I sat in my parents' living room. The familiar space now felt alien and tense. Mom and Dad looked at me with concerned eyes. Rachel, what's going on? Dad asked, his voice steady but tinged with worry. I took a deep breath. Mark and Whitney have been having an affair for 6 months. Mom's face went pale. Her hands were shaking as she clasped them together. What? How could that happen? Her voice was barely more than a whisper. Rachel, are you sure? Dad looked at me, searching for any sign that this might be a huge misunderstanding. I confronted them. They admitted everything. They think they're in love and expect me to just accept it, I said, my tone flat. Mom gasped. This is unbelievable. How could Whitney do this to you? Dad let out a sigh, rubbing his temples. Why didn't we see this coming? I shook my head. They were careful, but I found texts, saw them sneaking around. They didn't even try to hide it once I confronted them. Mom's shock turned to anger. This is not acceptable. We need to confront Whitney for what she did to you. Her voice trailed off, overwhelmed by emotion. Dad glanced at me, his protective nature taking over. What do you want to do, Rachel? You need to decide how we move forward. I stared at them, feeling the weight of their support. It was time for action. I want revenge, I said. They need to face the consequences. Mom nodded fiercely. We're with you, whatever you need. Dad's eyes hardened. Your mother's right. They will not get away with this. I felt a surge of determination. I've hired an investigator, I said, watching their reactions closely. We're going to uncover anything we can use against them. Dad's face softened a bit. Good. We'll make sure they regret this. Later that evening, standing in my now empty-feeling home, I picked up the phone and called Mike, the private investigator. His gruff voice answered, "Rachel, it's time. I'm ready to proceed with everything we discussed." "Understood," I replied. "I'll start digging into Whitney and Mark's backgrounds. We'll find something," he promised. "Thanks, Mike," I said, my voice firm. "You'll get through this, Rachel. They won't know what hit them," he assured me before hanging up. The next few days passed in a blur of planning and coordination. I barely saw Mark, and when I did, the sight of him was both enraging and nauseating. I decided to move out temporarily, staying with my parents to focus on my plan. One afternoon, while sorting through some old photos, Mom approached me. "Rachel, you've always been strong. Don't let them take that from you." "I won't, Mom," I said, meeting her eyes. "They'll pay for what they've done." Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Mike. "Found something on Whitney. Let's meet." My heart pounded as I read the text. This was just the beginning. Whitney and Mark thought they could betray me without consequences. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. Mike and I met at a small diner on the outskirts of town. Pete slid a folder across the table towards me. "You were right about your sister," he said, his face serious. "Whitney has a history of manipulating men. Here's everything I found." I opened the folder, flipping through the pages. "What exactly am I looking at?" I asked, my eyes scanning the documents. 2 years ago, she was involved with a guy named Derek. He ended up losing his job and savings because of her, Mike explained. And she left him high and dry. My blood boiled. "So she has a pattern," I said. Mike nodded. "There's more. Mark isn't as clean as he seems either. Fraudulent business practices, tax evasion. He's been careful, but not perfect. We can use this against him." I leaned back in my chair, feeling a surge of grim satisfaction. "This is great. Thank you, Mike. The evidence gave me concrete steps for my revenge. Just be smart about it, Rachel. People like them don't change easily," Mike warned before leaving. Later that evening, I sat with my parents, reviewing the findings. "We have everything we need to take them down," I said, spreading the documents out on the kitchen table. Dad glanced over the documents, his expression hardening. "This is serious stuff. If we play it right, they'll face some real consequences." Mom, scrutinizing a photo of Whitney with Derek, asked, "What's our next move?" I exhaled, folding my arms. "We hit them where it hurts, legally and financially. I'm already planning to drain our joint accounts and sell off assets without Mark's knowledge. We'll expose their secrets to everyone they know, and then I'll report Mark's illegal activities." Mom shook her head in disbelief. "I can't believe she's done this before, and Mark involved in fraud." Dad nodded. "We'll support you however we can. They can't be allowed to get away with this." The next few days were a whirlwind of covert actions. I met with our financial advisor, making discreet changes to our accounts. Every step I took was calculated to dismantle the life Mark had built, piece by piece. One evening, I was packing up the last of my things to fully move out when Mark walked in. "Rachel, where are you going?" he asked, his eyes narrowing as he saw the boxes. "I'm leaving, Mark. You and Whitney can have each other," I replied, my voice cold. "You don't have to do this," he said, stepping closer. "We can work something out." "Work something out," I laughed bitterly. "You've already made your choice. Now live with it." As I moved to leave, he grabbed my arm. "Rachel, please, let's talk." I yanked my arm free. "There's nothing left to say. You and Whitney have destroyed everything." I left him standing there, the documents in my bag, heavy with vindication. Whitney and Mark thought they could carry on without consequences. They were about to learn the hard way that betrayal comes with a price, and I was determined to make sure they paid it in full. I rendezvoused with Mike again, this time in his office, a small space cluttered with files and photographs. He handed me another folder. "Rachel, these are the legal documents we discussed. The evidence against Mark is watertight." I flipped through the pages, a sense of grim satisfaction building. Fraud, tax evasion, shady business deals. "This will ruin him," I said, more to myself than to Mike. "Let's be careful about the timing," Mike advised. "Report these too soon, and he might have time to cover his tracks." I nodded, agreed. "I'll wait until everything is in place." Returning home, I carefully began to sell off assets, making sure to do everything under the radar. Late at night, I sat at the computer, transfixed by the cold light of the screen as I made transfers, draining accounts. The next afternoon, I visited our attorney, Mr. Stevens. "Rachel, you're sure about this?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "I'm sure," I replied, handing over the legal documents. "We'll move forward legally. I want Mark stripped of everything." "Understood," Mr. Stevens assured me. "I'll begin the proceedings." Just as I was walking out, I bumped into Whitney. "Rachel, why are you here?" she asked, suspicion evident in her eyes. "Sorting some legal matters," I responded coolly, maintaining my composure. "Are you still on this revenge kick?" Whitney smirked, almost condescendingly. "You should just move on." I leaned closer, my words cutting. "You have no idea what's coming. Enjoy your time while you can." Whitney rolled her eyes. "You always were dramatic." I walked away, my steps brisk, my resolve firmer than ever. At home, my phone buzzed with a message from Mike. Found another angle on Mark. "Need to meet." We met again at his office. "Mark's involved in some serious tax evasion. Here's the documented proof. We can tip off the IRS once everything else is set," Mike explained. "Perfect," I replied, feeling the pieces of my plan coming together. "Let's move forward with this. I want the authorities to be ready when the time comes." The days passed with a focused intensity. Finally, I was ready. I sat down with my family, explaining the plan for the final move. "Rachel, are you sure this is what you want?" Mom asked, concern lining her features. "Yes, Mom. They deserve this," I responded, my voice steady. Dad nodded. "Then we're with you." With everything in place, I made the call to the IRS. "I have information regarding tax evasion by Mark Phillips," I said, my voice calm but determined. I then uploaded Whitney's past and Mark's affairs to an anonymous blog, ensuring everyone in our social circle would see it. The blog gained traction quickly, and the truth was out in the open. Days later, my phone rang. It was Mr. Stevens. "Rachel, it's done. Mark's accounts are frozen, and charges are being filed." I exhaled, feeling a rush of victory. Mark and Whitney thought they could betray me without facing consequences. They were wrong. This was just the beginning of their downfall, and I was ready to see it through to the end. The ripple effect of our efforts was immediate. Within days, whispers and pointed stares began to follow Whitney and Mark everywhere they went. My heart pounded with satisfaction. The anonymous blog had worked like a charm, and the evidence of Mark's affairs and shady dealings spread like wildfire. I met with Mike one last time. "The authorities are closing in on Mark," he said, a triumphant air about him. "Expect his arrest soon." "Thank you, Mike," I replied. "I couldn't have done this without your help." Later that evening, I was invited to a friend's gathering. I hesitated but decided to go. It was time to face the social circle that Whitney and Mark had tainted. I arrived to hushed conversations. As soon as I entered, the room fell silent. All eyes were on me. My friend Jenna approached. "Rachel, it's all over the blog. The things Whitney has done in Mark, we had no idea." I gave a small nod. It needed to be exposed. People began approaching me, offering their support and apologies for not seeing the truth sooner. Among the crowd, I spotted Whitney. Her face was pale, a cocktail of embarrassment and fury twisting her features. Whitney stormed up to me. "How could you do this?" she hissed, her voice low but venomous. "You've ruined us. Did you think you could destroy my life without consequences?" I replied coldly, "This is just the beginning, Whitney." She shook her head in disbelief. "You're cruel, Rachel. This isn't justice. It's a vendetta." I said, "Call it what you want. You deserve every bit of it." My voice was unwavering. The next morning, I got a call from Mr. Stevens. "Mark was arrested this morning. He informed me it's all over the news." I turned on the TV, watching as Mark was led away in handcuffs. There it was, my victory, broadcast for the world to see. Later that day, I visited my parents to share the news. Mom hugged me tightly. "Rachel, I'm so proud of you. You stood up for yourself." Dad nodded in agreement. "You've shown incredible strength." I smiled, grateful for their unwavering support. "I couldn't have done it without you," I said. That evening, My doorbell rang. I opened it to find Mark standing there, his face gaunt and eyes hollow. "Rachel, please let's talk," he pleaded. "There's nothing to talk about, Mark," I said firmly, standing my ground. "It's over." He slumped. "I'm going to prison, Rachel. Can't we find a way to fix this?" "You should have thought about that before betraying me," I responded, my voice steady. "Now you face the consequences." As I shut the door, a profound sense of closure washed over me. They thought they could play me for a fool. They thought they could walk away unscathed. But now, Mark would pay for his crimes, and Whitney's true nature was exposed for everyone to see. I stood there, taking it all in, the drama, the deceit, the revenge. It had all led to this moment. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I had taken control, exacted my revenge, and now I was ready to start anew. Watching Mark being led away in handcuffs on the evening news gave me a momentary sense of triumph, but I knew the battle wasn't entirely over. I still had to face Whitney one last time. That weekend, I decided to host a small dinner at my parents' house, inviting close family and friends. As expected, Whitney arrived, looking frazzled and desperate. Her eyes darted around the room, landing on me with a mix of hatred and despair. During dinner, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Whitney finally spoke up, her voice trembling. "Rachel, we need to talk alone?" I glanced around at the concerned faces of my parents and friends, then nodded. "Let's step outside." We stepped into the backyard. The cool evening air was biting at my skin. Whitney turned to me, her face a mask of fury. "You've ruined my life. Everyone hates me now. Was that your plan all along?" I folded my arms, keeping my voice steady. "You brought this on yourself, Whitney. You and Mark made your choices, and now you're facing the consequence." She scoffed, her eyes flashing with anger. "You're so self-righteous. You think exposing us makes you a hero?" "No," I replied calmly, "but it ensures you understand the pain you caused. You betrayed your own sister, Whitney, and you thought you could get away with it." Whitney's face contorted in rage. "You're no saint, Rachel. Don't pretend you are." "I'm not," I admitted. "But I'm not the one who tore apart our family for selfish reasons." She took a step closer, her voice growing icy. "You think you've won, but this isn't over. I'll find a way to get back at you." I held my ground, meeting her glare. "Do what you want, Whitney. Just know that you've lost more than you can imagine. Our family, our friends, they see who you really are now." Whitney's eyes filled with tears of frustration. She turned abruptly and walked away, leaving me standing there in the cold night. I watched her go, feeling a mix of pity and resolve. Returning inside, my parents looked at me with concern. "Are you okay, Rachel?" Mom asked softly. "I'm fine," I replied, offering a small smile. "It's done." The following days were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and media coverage. Mark's assets were seized, his reputation destroyed. Whitney, now publicly disgraced, found herself cut off from the support she once relied on. One evening, while reading through some documents, I received a call from Detective Harris. "Rachel, we've completed the investigation. Mark has been formally charged with multiple counts of fraud and tax evasion. He'll be facing a lengthy prison sentence." "Thank you for the update, Detective," I replied, feeling a sense of closure. After hanging up, I sat back, reflecting on the events that had unfolded. Despite the chaos and heartbreak, I knew I had emerged stronger. Mark and Whitney thought they could break me, but they only reinforced my determination. As I looked out the window, the sun setting on the horizon, I felt a newfound sense of peace. This chapter of my life was closing, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. The drama and deceit had tested me, but I had prevailed. Now it was time to rebuild, to find myself again, and to step into the future with the unmistakable strength born from overcoming betrayal. I stood in the courthouse hallway, the cold tiles beneath my feet grounding me as I prepared for the final showdown. Mark's trial was drawing to a close, and it was my turn to face him one last time. I walked into the courtroom, my parents right behind me, their support a steady presence. Mark sat at the defendant's table, his once confident demeanor shattered. His lawyer whispered in his ear, But Mark's eyes locked onto mine with a mix of pleading and resentment. His fall from grace was almost complete. As I took the stand, the prosecutor gestured for me to begin. Rachel, please describe how you discovered the illegal activities of the defendant. I gripped the microphone, my voice steady. I found evidence of tax evasion and fraudulent business practices. Mark had been hiding his crimes for years, but I made sure to uncover them all. Mark's lawyers stood, determined to undermine me. Miss Winters, isn't it true that your actions were fueled by a personal vendetta? I met his gaze unflinchingly. Yes, I was betrayed by Mark and my sister, but that doesn't change the fact that he broke the law. His crimes are real, regardless of my motivations. The lawyer pressed on. You went to extreme lengths to ruin Mr. Phillips. Are you proud of that? I'm proud of standing up for myself, I replied firmly. Mark chose to betray me, and he chose to break the law. He needs to face the consequences. The judge nodded, signaling for the next witness. I stepped down, feeling the weight of the moment, but knowing I had done all I could. After the final statements were made, the jury deliberated. When they returned, the foreman stood. We find the defendant guilty on all charges. Mark's face crumbled as the realization sank in. The judge pronounced the sentence, a lengthy prison term and substantial fines. As Mark was led away, he turned to me one last time. Rachel, I'm sorry for everything. His apology felt hollow, years too late and forged from necessity rather than remorse. I simply nodded, turning away. Outside the courtroom, Whitney waited. Her face a pale shadow of the confident sister I once knew. She approached hesitantly, her eyes downcast. Rachel, can we talk about what I did? My voice edged with exhaustion. I'm sorry for everything, she whispered, tears brimming. I never meant for it to get this far. I sighed, the weight of our shared history pressing heavily on me. Sorry doesn't fix this, Whitney. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them. I lost everything, she murmured, looking truly defeated. My family, my friends. I looked at her, seeing a trace of the sister I loved, buried under layers of deceit. You have a lot to answer for, Whitney. Maybe someday we can move past this, but right now, I need time. As I walked away, Mom and Dad by my side, I felt a sense of finality. The betrayal had torn us apart, but I was ready to heal. Back at home, I packed a few belongings. It was time for a fresh start away from the shadows of my past. I hugged my parents tightly. I need to go away for a while, find myself again. Mom nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. Take all the time you need. We'll be here when you're ready. Dad embraced me, his voice filled with pride. You've shown incredible strength, Rachel. Remember that. Thanks, Dad, I replied, tears glistening in my eyes. I'll come back stronger. I promise. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror, watching my parents fade into the distance. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful. My journey wasn't over, but I had taken the first step towards reclaiming my life, and that more than anything gave me the courage to face whatever lay ahead. As I settled into my new apartment, a small but cozy place across town, I felt a strange mix of relief and uncertainty. The memories of betrayal and revenge were still fresh, but for the first time in months, there was room to breathe. At work, things had shifted significantly. My boss, Mr. Everett, called me into his office one morning. Rachel, your resilience and professionalism through everything have been remarkable. We're promoting you to senior project manager. I blinked in surprise. Thank you, Mr. Everett. This means a lot to me. He smiled warmly. You earned it. Keep up the excellent work. Back at my desk, I found a congratulatory card from my colleagues, and for the first time in what felt like ages, I allowed myself to smile freely. One evening after work, I decided to join some friends for dinner. Jenna, my closest friend, raised her glass in a toast. Here to new beginnings and Rachel's well-deserved promotion. We clinked glasses, the sound of laughter filling the air. It felt good to be surrounded by supportive friends without the shadow of the betrayal looming over me. As we talked, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I stepped outside to answer it. Hello, Rachel, it's Whitney. I felt a pang of old frustration but kept my voice neutral. What do you want, Whitney? I just wanted to let you know I'm moving away. I need to start over somewhere new, she said, her voice fragile and broken. Good luck, Whitney, I replied, ending the call and feeling a sense of finality wash over me. A few weeks later, I found myself on a scenic trail, hiking to clear my mind. As I rounded a bend, I met a fellow hiker, a kind-looking man named Tom. We struck up a conversation and found we had a lot in common. Over the next several weeks, Tom and I grew closer. One evening, we were sitting on a bench overlooking the city. He turned to me, his expression earnest. Rachel, I know you've been through a lot, but I see so much strength in you. Would you consider going on a real date with me? I smiled, feeling a genuine warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. I'd like that, Tom. As our relationship blossomed, I found joy in the simple things again. Sharing laughter, exploring new places, and making new memories. Tom knew about my past but never judged me. Instead, he helped me see that my scars were not signs of weakness but of survival. Months passed, and I found myself genuinely happy. I had a job I loved, supportive friends and family, and a budding relationship with a man who respected and cared for me. My journey had been painful, but it had also led me to a place of real strength and resilience. Standing on the balcony of my apartment one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I realized that the life I'd rebuilt was stronger and more fulfilling than the one I'd left behind. The betrayal had tested me, but it had also revealed my true capacity for growth and recovery. As the cool evening breeze brushed against my face, I whispered to myself, I'm ready for whatever comes next. And for the first time, I truly believed it.